pastoralists have a lot of practical knowledge that researchers need to tap into. If you are able to read our papers, most of our papers, particularly in southern Ethiopia, you would realize how researchers can use indigenous knowledge actually to change the ideas of things. About, for example, traditional system of time, how society counted time. I was talking about the time, space, and the knowledge, right? Then how do society conceptualize time? That was an interesting part. And I had a PhD student, Waktole Tiki, from Ethiopia. And we worked on these Tula wells. And then we worked about this time. We found out over 500 years, reconstructed time over 500 years. What happened during those 500 years, during each Gada period? Gada is the ruling system after every 8 years. It turns for the same group after 40 years. Then another 280 years, and so on. That is how their time is calculated. And that's how they remember. And they have individuals like Borboribule. He's almost an encyclopedia of the Borana society. He's a walking encyclopedia. And that's how knowledge is tapped into. And then try to find out the empirical basis of some of these arguments. You have seen the graph I showed at the end. Yeah. That is based on the narratives of the Gabra, on time, over time. Because each year they describe, I say this year, Al-Sinin, this group went in this direction. Talata, there was drought. And then another one, then the Sunday year, there was floods. You see, there are different conditions. All I did was to turn these floods into plus or negative, and so on. Heavy rains become a positive. 2-year drought becomes a negative. That is that's just a creation of the thinking, using the indigenous knowledge and turning into some kind of way of communicating to the people doing science. Yeah.
Amazing. I read Gabra and I saw the timelines by Robinson and Tablino.
Yes, Robinson, Paul Robinson.
Yeah.
I've forgotten his name in the lecture, but his name is Paul Robinson, a good historian.
Yeah.
And you see, he was lucky. During the time of Paul Robinson and also Paul Tablino got him, there was a Gabra elder. I would probably remember his name after, maybe, not now. That elder knew the history of Gabra and the Gabra environment more than anybody else. I forgot what his name is. He's of course not alive. Why it not Paul Robinson who recorded that history of Father Tablino? Then that history would be gone. And there are many, like, in Marsabit and others, all those old fellows from Chief Jilo Tukena and others, Alkano Gurra, and so on, all those elders, they are gone. And the history, the knowledge is gone with them. So actually this summer school, then coming back to the school again, the idea is how even this knowledge, indigenous knowledge, is not static. It changes with generation. The most important thing is how one generation after the other remembers what the previous generation has told them. But in our society now, there's something very dangerous coming. Corrosive kind of way of contradictory type of knowledge. Religious knowledge, which contradicts with the indigenous knowledge. And many people think that by following the religious knowledge, if you are Muslim, for example, you want to follow what the sheikh says, but not what the elder says. In that case, you don't know what the actual sheikh knows, because you cannot read Arabic, and you don't understand, but you just listen to sometimes what he says, what he preaches, right? Then you forget about yours. I mentioned about a good example is this: the wedding which my son had yesterday in Marsabit, the traditional wedding. In this traditional wedding, there are a lot of ceremonies which are done, including sacrificing of animals, killing of animals, and then cutting the skin strip and putting it on the hand, and so on. But according to Muslim, that is haram. You see, but if you want to now wed your daughter, and if that is haram and you are Muslim, then you forget about it, and that knowledge is gone. That's what I mean. It's a corrosive knowledge, very corrosive to the indigenous knowledge. So our people are suffering. So the more you record at this moment, the better. I had the opportunity of interviewing elders from 1976. From 1970, that was my first year university. And all those tapes exist. One thing which I don't know now, which I want to find out, is how do I turn, and the bad news is that those old type of tapes that used to play like this, the big spool, the machines no longer exist. Most of them are, even mine, most are broken. But I have the tapes, which means I have the history going from 1976. I have interviewed elders from southern Ethiopia, northern Kenya, people who are no longer living, but who knew. My father lived for 105 years, Obasarite Hura, the oldest in Sololo area. And he had knowledge of water. Like, I think there is only Halake Guyotu who knew the names of all the wells, the property rights of the individual wells, and so on. My father was the second one. Comfy. Now, if I didn't record that, actually my PhD student, what he did was to use my notes, and then in addition he collected from Borborbule and others. So what I'm saying is that indigenous knowledge of societies, particularly in the drylands among pastoral societies, is really something to be tapped into. You must get that recorded. And it is important to get these historical storylines like the one you mentioned to me. I think it's important for them to know that the policies are dysfunctional. The kind of policy, the so-called policy, nobody is acting on policy. I mean, policy is on paper. But the practical action of the policy is absent in totality. And think of it this way. Pastoral development as a model was meant to have a ranch in 1960s and 1970s. But who talks about ranches these days? Nobody. Now you call it conservancy, a different name, because it has a different value for this particular period. So the whole vocabulary of development has changed. Then now you go back to the development has been reduced to the extent of gender something, gender balance, whichever is the case. But gender is pulling one item out of a big, a complex scenario. And by addressing gender alone and not addressing the rest, you are not solving any problem. So that kind of policy is useless in the first place, as far as I am concerned. And one unfortunate thing, although this discussion of policy is so popular in academia and particularly in the media and so on, but really how it is applied on the ground is rarely seen. It's rare, very rare. So if you read African Environmental Crisis, you will see what I mean. Yes, that book tells the story from the beginning to the end, covering different subjects, both from conservation to implementation of large-scale development programs and so on. For the student, I think this is good to know. I mean, from their reading, they know what kind of policy is applied to land property rights, for example, community property rights. Then they can ask the elders how this is working. What happened is that the government passed the Land Rights Act of 2016, and then the Community Land Act of 2019, and then it stopped implementing them. Why? Today there is a fight over border rights. You know, recently there was between Isiolo and Wajir, there are these border areas where they shared the grazing for many years. But the Somalis from Wajir have been encroaching on the grazing lands of the Waso Boran, okay, over time. And the Waso Boran left it, left them graze because the other side did not claim it. They just wanted to use it. For them, there is a difference between user right and property right itself. So, but now the ones from northern eastern used user right as a basis for making claims for property rights, and that has brought a clash. The government has no solution, to be very honest, because who ordered the publication of the what is it called, these articles which are published normally, which comes out.
Acts, eh?
No, it's not really the act. What do they call it? If the government want to implement something, Gazette notice, Gazette notice number 29, Gazette notice number 30, and so forth. Which office published it? On what basis? What information did they use? When they actually create a new sub-county across the border of another county. That is to bring conflict between the two communities. Okay? So, who is not implementing the policy properly? Yeah? Whoever is dealing with this is not implementing it properly. Otherwise, how do you advertise for publication of a Gazette notice when it is constructed on an erroneous basis? The geographical space of that Gazette notice is not even given. It does say it's from this point to that point. These border areas have markers, okay? And the markers are the names of this place. Let's say Kuntolo and so on and so forth. Arbijaan and so forth. Arbijaan is just one small spot, like Go-To is one spot. If you want to know where Go-To is in the map of Isiolo, it can only be here. Now, if you want to say Go-To sub-district, where does that sub-district extend? Does it extend on this side of the river? And how many kilometers further inside? And out and to the other side? How many kilometers? Without you saying so, then you are creating a problem between community on this side of the river and the community on the other side of the river. So what kind of policy is that? It's a problem. So I think our policies are not carefully examined for their practicalities and the implication for their sustainability. It's a problem. There was this policy called rangeland management in Isiolo County. You look at it, my friend. That policy, we have the Act of 2019, Community Land Act. The community would be responsible for managing their rangelands. They will have a committee. The committee will be selected by the people who are registered for that region and so forth. So they will have the chairman and the secretary and so forth. But the rangeland policy, which is meant to facilitate the implementation of this policy, says that the head of the rangeland management is the district commission, the governor, assisted by the county commissioner, and it is only after the 10th of 11th step that you see a name of a pastoralist. And for this they say it's a sheikh or somebody who is disabled. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. It's a complete joke. I think the government is not serious. Or at least, although everybody blames the government, but maybe the people who are dealing with this in Isiolo, it's a complete joke. And they say we have a policy for rangeland. What kind of policy do you have? A policy that contradicts another policy.
Even when you have it right, the practical application of it sometimes.
Yeah, it's a problem. And I think it's good for students to learn this, that applying policies has many challenges. You can have nice policies on paper, but how to apply is quite challenging. I think this would be far more effective than any other project I think we will try to attempt to implement on the ground. First of all, you are training 30 students per year, for example, at a master's and PhD level. By 10 years, you could have produced how many PhDs gone through this system? And there would be new understanding. I suppose the science is not static. There's some new ideas that come up. And then these ideas can be discussed. Maybe next school would discuss not on climate change, but something else.